People often say silence is golden, but in this story, silence is the purest form of revenge. 3 months ago, I was robbed of everything: my savings, the keepsakes of my late wife, and my faith in my own family. Not by a stranger, but by my own son-in-law. He thought I was just a useless old man who would sit and cry in an empty house. But he forgot one thing. I spent 35 years reading every line of numbers, and when needed, I can turn justice into a perfect balance sheet. When he bought a new Audi and a $400,000 house with stolen money, I didn't get angry. I just smiled. Because from that moment, his life was already being rewritten by me, line by line, word by word. And when he finally knelt and begged, I only said one sentence: "Justice doesn't need noise, Jason. It only needs completion." If you've ever been looked down on, ever had what you love stolen from you, ever stayed silent because you thought resistance was useless, then stay. Because this story will make you understand that silence isn't the end. It's the first signal of justice. Before we begin, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and comment the name of the city you're watching from. Because when you finish this story, you'll believe one thing: justice may be slow, but it never loses its way. That morning, Tucson was so quiet, it felt like even the desert was holding its breath. I woke earlier than usual, made coffee, and opened the window to let the light flood the kitchen. Evelyn used to say, "Morning is when the house is most honest, before it has time to hide anything." I've kept that habit, even though she's been gone for 5 years. 2 cups of coffee, 2 small plates, one for me, one for the person no longer here. I meant to take some cash from the safe to pay the man fixing the porch roof. That safe was the one thing I trusted most. I knew every click of its mechanism like a heartbeat. But that morning, when the door opened, there was only emptiness. No bills, no jewelry box, no documents. Just cold metal air, smooth, spotless, silent. I placed my hand on the steel. No scratches, no pry marks. Too perfect. Only someone who knew exactly how to open it could have done it. I sat down and looked around the study. No mess, no open window, no foreign footprints. I pulled out my old notebook and wrote everything down, instinctively, as if the auditor in me had never retired after 30 years. March 5th. Safe empty. No forced entry. Loss: 200,000 cash, 50,000 jewelry, wife's collection. I looked toward the window. Outside, the cactus Evelyn planted stood still, its shadow long across the ground. The desert knows no mercy, but it never lies. I'd told that to countless clients trying to hide income from the IRS. Now it was my turn to face that truth. Only 3 people knew the code: me, my daughter Melissa, and Jason, her husband. They were living in the guest house out back. Temporarily, after Jason said he'd lost his job, they promised to stay for a few months. It had been 12. I called the police. 2 young officers came, took photos, and asked all the questions I'd already predicted. "No signs of forced entry, sir." "Does anyone else know the code?" I answered shortly. "My daughter, and my son-in-law." One nodded, jotting notes, then said gently, "There'll be a report, but cases like this, usually it's someone inside." When they left, I sat there in a bright but cold room. Sunlight hit the wedding photo on the wall. Evelyn in her white dress, me in a silver-gray suit. I touched the glass. A thin layer of dust. Since she died, I hadn't cleaned it, afraid to wipe away the last layer of memory. In the afternoon, Melissa brought up a tart. "Dad, what did the police say?" "Nothing yet." Jason stood behind her. New polo shirt, hair slicked, expensive cologne. "Probably just a mistake," he joked, half smiling. "Who'd want to rob a retired accountant anyway?" I looked at him and saw his eyes blink one beat too fast when I asked, "Yes, who indeed?" They went back to the guest house. The door shut. Their laughter faded through the brick wall. I stood, walked to the open safe. The smell of steel mixed with cold coffee, an odor like truth freshly uncovered. I didn't get angry. I didn't call the police again. I just sat down, took the Mont Blanc pen Evelyn had given me, and wrote one more line. People lie. Numbers don't. I knew this wouldn't end with accusations. I'd taught hundreds of people that every fraud leaves a trace if you know where to look. This time, I'd apply that lesson to my own home. At 8 p.m., I heard an engine start outside. Jason called out, "Come on, I booked a table in Scottsdale. Let's celebrate the promotion." The door slammed. Tires crunched on gravel. I stepped onto the porch and watched the red taillights of his Audi fade through the palms. In that moment, I heard Evelyn's voice in my head. "Don't act out of anger, Ray. Act out of truth." I nodded, returned to my desk. The bourbon in my glass reflected the soft gold of the lamp, calm as a lake. I wrote the final line of the day. Let them celebrate tonight. Tomorrow, the counting begins. 3 days after the theft, Tucson was so hot, the road in front of the house gleamed like a mirror. I had just washed my hands when I heard an engine outside, the sound smooth and unfamiliar, not like any car I'd ever heard from the guest house. I stepped out onto the porch and saw Jason standing there beside a silver Audi Q7, so shiny it hurt the eyes, with a brand new license plate. He wore sunglasses, a white polo, Balenciaga sneakers, things a temporarily unemployed man could not afford. "What do you think, Dad?" he said, excited. "I just closed a new project in Phoenix. Figured I'd treat myself." I nodded, keeping my voice neutral. "What project is that, son?" "Consulting for a blockchain company, you know. Not everyone gets it." A vague answer. I only asked lightly. "Did you pay by card or finance?" "Cash, Dad. I like it quick." Cash. Those two syllables fell like metal. That afternoon, I visited Mrs. Keene, the elderly neighbor 2 houses down. She met me with an iced tea and said straight away, "Have you seen the new car? I was at the dealer this morning. I saw him counting cash, and I put down a $25,000 deposit right then. The staff said it's rare." I only smiled. "Thanks." That evening, I opened my notebook and wrote a new line. March 8th, Audi Q7 purchase. $25,000 cash down. 3 days after the theft. My handwriting shook a little, but I knew I'd found the first mark. In accounting, I used to tell students, if you want to find wrongdoing, start with what people show off first. After dinner, Melissa came by and hugged me. "Dad, the police say there's no lead yet. I don't think Jason did it. He's just trying." I asked quietly, "How much cash do you think your husband has?" "Maybe a few thousand, Dad. He said he just got a bonus." I nodded. "Okay, believe that." Her answer left her oddly quiet, and she left. When the door closed, I looked through the window. Moonlight slid across Jason's silver hood, reflecting like a cold streak of light. I stood still and realized I was looking at a reflection of trust. Polished, hollow, easy to vanish after a wash. That night, I opened my laptop and checked the bank account. Everything looked normal, no strange transactions, but Jason had withdrawn the entire balance of $1,200 from his personal account just before the theft and never replenished it. A man who just received a bonus would not drain his account like that. I added another line. Pattern mismatch. Zero balance pre-purchase. Possible cash origin outside account. In other words, he had money from somewhere untraceable. The next morning, while I was watering the cactus on the porch, Jason came out with a coffee, confident. "Dad, Melissa says you're still upset about the money. Don't worry, the police will handle it." I replied calmly, "I trust them. They have their ways. As for me, I have my ways. I'll check everything, every dollar, every word people think I don't notice." He raised an eyebrow. "What ways?" I gave a small smile. "I'm not investigating, I'm just reviewing the numbers. You know, a man who's been an accountant his whole life. If something's wrong, it will show itself." The remark stunned him for a moment. Then he forced a laugh. He didn't understand that reviewing the numbers, coming from a former IRS man, means tracing every transfer, every tiny piece of evidence. It's the only method I trust. No feelings, only proof. That afternoon, I called Marcus Webb, an old friend and tax attorney. His voice was hoarse, steady, and calm. "Long time, Ray. What brings you?" "I need the law, Marcus, when someone thinks they're smarter than the law." He chuckled softly. "This will be interesting. Let me bring in someone. Diana Torres, a forensic accountant. She's good at tracing cash and lies." I looked at my notebook, turned the page, and wrote, March 11th. Contacted Marcus Webb, attorney. Meeting scheduled. March 13th at 9:30 a.m. Before closing the book, I added a small, almost whispered line for myself and for Evelyn. "I'm not seeking revenge. I'm seeking truth. Revenge fades. Truth lasts." Outside, late afternoon sun slanted through the window and lit the old photo. Evelyn still smiled like she always did. I took the last sip of bourbon, wood smoke on my throat, sharp but clear. A man who has traced thousands of financial wrongs would not find it hard to trace one in his own house. This time, I would not file reports with anyone. I would keep everything until justice could write its own conclusion. That morning, Tucson felt frozen in a gray sunlight. I woke early, made coffee, put it in a thermos, and drove to the glass building on Broadway where Marcus Webb's law office is located. He had once been a colleague at the IRS, and now practiced privately, the kind of man who could tell by a signature that he'd seen big frauds. I arrived 10 minutes early, but he was already there, a cup of black coffee on the desk, eyes on a file. "Ray," he said, his voice low and steady, "long time." "I wish I were seeing you for a happier reason," I replied. He gave a thin smile. "If it's about money missing from a safe, I'm afraid the police won't be much help." "I don't need their help. I need the truth. And the trail of cash." Webb put down his pen and gestured for me to sit. On the wall, a Harvard J.D. hung under a thin layer of dust, beside a framed photo with his wife and children. A man who knows the law and how to walk around it while staying legal. "I have notes," I said, handing him a thick bundle of files, bound with a rubber band. He opened them, eyes skimming the lines. The date of the theft, the value, the time Jason bought the car, the cash amounts, and my annotations. "Careful as always," he nodded. "You have a timeline, motive, and suspicious behavior, but you don't have evidence to convince a court." "I don't want the court. I want to know where he got the money." "That we can do." Webb tapped the desk, then continued, "I'll call Diana Torres. She used to be a forensic accountant at the IRS and now freelances. If there's an unusual cash flow, she'll find it." At 9:30, the door opened. A woman in her 40s with black hair tied back and a white blouse came in. Diana shook my hand, her smile brief and professional. "Marcus gave me the outline. I need specific data, bank accounts, recent transactions, public assets, and any information about Jason's income." "I have everything," I said, opening my laptop and handing her the compiled file. She looked, nodded. "Perfect. You work like a true taxman." "I worked for them for 40 years. Then this will be easy." In 2 hours, we reviewed property records, vehicle registrations, and Jason's payment history. Diana wrote swiftly, her eyes cold and precise. When she noticed something, she'd only lift an eyebrow. Marcus understood immediately. When we finished, she said, "I need 3 days to verify. From what I see, Jason has no legitimate income source that could produce $25,000 in cash. If you want, I can produce a full forensic report, a timeline, and cash flow discrepancies." "I want that. The fee is $1,200. I will deliver it in 4 days. I'll pay now." After she left, Marcus looked at me. "What will you do if you find he really used your money?" "I don't know," I said, calm, "but I certainly won't call the police." "You intend to handle it yourself?" "I intend to let the law work, just by a different path." Webb gave a small laugh, part admiration, part warning. "Ray, I know you. When you say not calling the police, you mean you'll find a way to make him fall on his own. I won't break the law, Marcus. I'll let the numbers speak." That afternoon, I drove home in silence. The western sky was a blaze of red. sunlight catching the rear view mirror in a long streak of fire. I turned on the radio but heard nothing. My mind was full of calculations. I thought of Evelyn and how she used to say, "Don't react in anger, Ray. React with precision." When I arrived home, the silver Audi was still parked in the yard, its wheels dusty from the desert. Melissa was watering plants, and Jason stood nearby on the phone, his voice low and hurried. I crossed the yard and greeted them coolly. He forced a smile. "You seem better, Dad." "Better? I just met an old friend from the IRS." He stiffened for a second. "Oh, really?" "Yes. He still does the same work, finding money people don't report." I looked him straight in the eye as I said it. For a second his pupils dilated. Then he masked it with a fake smile. "How great," he said. "Maybe I'll need someone like that for my company." "Call when you need one," I replied, my voice light as nothing, because they might come looking on their own. That night I added a line to my notebook. March 13th, meeting with Webb and Torres. Confirmed. Source of cash unverified. Next, await forensic report. I sat on the porch watching the stars fall behind the Catalina Ridge. Each point of light seemed like a numeral on a ledger. Evelyn used to say that justice is not a bang. It is patience. I raised my bourbon and murmured to myself, "I don't need to shout. I'll just wait for the numbers to speak." 3 days after the meeting, I received an email from Diana Torres at 7:12 a.m., the subject line short and sharp. Preliminary findings. She didn't say much, just a 5-page PDF. I printed it, laid it on the wooden desk, and opened the window so the sunlight hit every word. The first line told me I'd been right. Subject, Jason Cooper. No legitimate source was identified for a $25,000 cash transaction on March 8th. Income verification inconsistent. Savings insufficient. Timeline correlates directly with reported theft on March 5th. Each line felt like a cold knife. No accusation needed, just numbers. 3 days after the theft, he had $25,000 in cash. In his account, no legal withdrawals. No loan, no bonus, no dividends. Nothing. I held my coffee, looking out at the yard where the silver Audi sat under the sun. Melissa came out carrying a watering can, her face bright, unaware. I smiled at her, but in my mind everything had shifted into calculation. I was no longer the wounded father. I was a tax investigator, tracing undeclared cash flow. By 10, I drove to Webb's office. He was already reading Diana's report, glasses sliding down his nose. "She's good," he said. "Enough evidence for a civil fraud case." "I don't want to sue," I said evenly. "I want to know where the money went next." "She tracked that too." Webb pulled another sheet. "There's a mortgage application dated March 20th. Jason Cooper reported an income of $68,000 a year, with a down payment of $45,000 cash. No source listed. No loan recorded. Property in Riverstone Heights." I gripped the chair. "He used my money to buy a house." Webb nodded. "And Melissa's name isn't on the deed. Just his." A long silence. I could hear the clock ticking, each beat like a hammer in my head. Then I said slowly, "Marcus, I want to play a little longer." "What do you mean?" "I don't want to touch the law. I want to let the law move on its own, if I just place the first marble." Webb raised an eyebrow. "What are you planning?" "Find what he owes the government. If I can buy it, I'll make that house mine. Legally, step by step." Webb stayed silent, then smiled faintly. "Still the old Ray? I'll check his property tax records." That afternoon I drove home through light rain. Steam rose from the road like silver mist. I sat in the car watching through the windshield as Jason and Melissa set the dinner table on the porch. He laughed, said something that made her laugh too. The false piece of it reminded me of Evelyn. She once said, "People laugh loudest when they're hiding something." I went inside, sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and created a new file. Operation Ledger. 1. Theft confirmed, March 5th. 2. Vehicle purchase, $25,000 cash, March 8th. 3. House down payment, $45,000 cash, March 20th. 4. Total unaccounted cash, $70,000 in 15 days. 5. Investigation target, property, tax records, debt exposure. I wrote the last line darker than the rest. Every thief leaves a receipt. 35 years in taxation taught me one thing. People can erase data, they can change statements, but they cannot erase their own history. That night, after both of them had gone back to the guest house, I stepped onto the porch and listened to the rain tapping on the roof. The Audi shimmered under the streetlight, water streaming down its sides like reversed memories. I took my phone, snapped a photo, and sent it to Webb with a message. This is where the money sleeps. The next morning, he replied, Found something. County records show unpaid property tax, $8,400. Tax years 2022 to 2023. That's our crack. I read the text and smiled faintly. Crack. The word forensic experts use for a small fracture. If handled right, it can bring down a wall. At noon, Jason knocked on the door. Dad, I'm sorry if I've made you feel distant. I just want things between us to be better. I looked at him, his sincerity so perfectly rehearsed. It was almost funny. It's fine, son, I said. I understand. By the way, how's the new house? Oh, we just signed yesterday. Riverstone Heights. I want you to see it. Good, I said, raising an eyebrow. Riverstone Heights, huh? They're strict with property taxes there. Don't forget to pay. The words made him freeze for a heartbeat. I saw it, the quick flicker of panic before his smile returned. Of course, Dad. He left, and I stood by the window, listening to the slow rhythm of rain. Some things don't need to be rushed. Justice isn't a highway. It's a dirt road full of potholes, but it always reaches the end. I took my notebook and wrote the final line of the day. March 24th. Property tax debt found. Next phase, acquisition. Justice doesn't start with anger. It starts with arithmetic. 3 days later, Webb called me early in the morning. He didn't greet or beat around the bush. He simply said, Ray, I found an entry point. I'm listening, I replied. Property tax, he said. The house in Riverstone Heights owes 2 tax periods, totaling $8,437. The county is about to sell the tax lien certificate. Anyone can buy it. If the debtor doesn't pay within 90 days, you know how it works. I fell silent. He used my money to buy the house, and now he owed the government because he couldn't keep up with expenses. That wasn't just irony. It was an opportunity. I want to buy that lien back, Marcus. I figured as much, he answered, his voice low. I'll set up a shell company to hide your name. What do you want to call it? Desert Peak Holdings. Sounds dry, just Arizona enough so no one asks. Webb laughed. I'll handle all the paperwork. When the lien issues, your company will be the first bidder. That afternoon, he emailed Certificate of Formation, Operating Agreement, Registered Agent Authorization. I printed them, signed each page, then folded them away. Everything legal, neat, clean, like the asset recoveries I'd seen my whole life at the IRS. I opened my notebook and wrote, March 27th, Desert Peak Holdings, LLC, established. Objective, acquire tax lien, Riverstone Heights. As I was clearing the desk, the phone rang. Melissa, Dad, we invited you to dinner. Jason wants to make peace. He says he went too far. The new house? Yes, Riverstone Heights. Come see. I want you to be proud. Fine, I said. Tomorrow. When I arrived the next day, Tucson's sunlight was thick and honeyed. Their house sat at the end of a citrus-lined street with a red-tiled roof and a small pool. Jason opened the door in a white shirt, a wide smile that couldn't quite hide clouded eyes. Dad, he said, come in. See? I did it. Inside, the living room shone. Travertine floors, leather sofa, granite kitchen counters. I ran a fingertip along the cold tabletop. Nice, I said. A place like this must be about $450,000. Around there, he replied proudly. The bank cleared it fast. My income looks steady, big down payment. They trust me. Webb had been right. He'd inflated his income on the mortgage application. In the mortgage file, he reported an income of $90,000 a year, while in truth it was only $65,000. A low-doc finance company just sees a large cash deposit and says yes, and that cash was my money. I asked lightly, "How did you report income so the bank would accept it so easily?" He shrugged. "You know, those online documents, people are flexible, as long as there's real cash." "Real cash," I repeated, looking straight at him. "Yes, real cash is all you need." In my head, the pieces fit. 3 days after the theft, he bought an Audi with cash. 2 weeks later, he put down a deposit on a $400,000 house. His real salary couldn't cover the taxes. A man like him, greedy and proud, didn't buy a house to live in. He bought it to prove something, to stand before his reflection and believe he'd match the man he parasitized. During dinner, he rambled about a real estate opportunity. "They're opening a new highway," he boasted. "This area will rise 10% this year. I'll flip it for $30,000 profit, pay off the car, and have some seed money." I smiled. "Good plan, son. Just hope the market doesn't fall." He laughed loudly and raised his glass. "I know what I'm doing. Real estate is how smart people get rich." "Sure," I said. "Just remember one thing. All houses need a clean foundation." His eyes dimmed for a moment. The line could sound harmless to outsiders, but he understood I wasn't talking about concrete. After I left his house, I sat in the car for a few minutes and ran numbers in my head. His mortgage about $2,801 a month, homeowner's insurance $400, car $650, living expenses at least $1,000, total nearly $4,800, while his real take-home pay after taxes was only $4,000. I smiled slightly. Numbers don't lie, and I knew he couldn't actually afford it, even if he wanted to. That night, Webb called back. "Interesting detail. The house carries a small unpaid tax from a rush closing. The seller didn't clear last year's taxes, and the county still lists the debt. Now the new owner must pay. You were right. The foundation's cracked." I chuckled softly. "So the foundation already has a crack." 2 weeks later, Webb reported, "Desert Peak Holdings completed the lien purchase. Total value, $9,018, including interest. From now on, he owes you, not the county. If he doesn't pay within 90 days, you have the right to foreclose." "Good," I said. "Let him think the storm has passed. When the air's calm, the waves begin." That night, I sat on the porch listening to desert winds whistle through the tiles, and wrote in my notebook. April 14th. Tax lien acquired. Jason's debt is now privately held under Desert Peak Holdings. He used my money to build his castle. Now I own its foundation. I looked up at the sky spattered with stars and thought of Evelyn. She used to say, "No need to chase the betrayer, Ray. Just wait for him to sink into what he built." I answered into the dark, "He's sinking, Evie, and this desert sand, it knows how to swallow the arrogant." 3 weeks had passed since Desert Peak Holdings officially purchased the tax lien, and Jason and Melissa were living in the illusion of victory. They call it a new era. I call it a period of drunken delusion. Every afternoon, I don't even have to be near, and I can hear their music online, in the videos they post. Laughter, clinking glasses, boastful lines like hot wind across the desert. I saw their social posts. The pool lit up. Cheap wine, but captioned, "Chateau de Victory." Melissa's caption, "We did it. Finally made it." Jason commented below, "From nothing to luxury. Hard work pays off." Friends congratulated them, and he replied to each with the smug tone of a man who thinks the universe owes him recognition. I scrolled down more. Another photo, him in front of the silver Audi, shirt unbuttoned 2 buttons, arms crossed, caption, "Some men talk finance, others build it." A friend joked, "Did your father-in-law lend you the money?" He replied with a mocking emoji, "Not this time. Old money, stayed retired." Melissa double-tapped. I stopped there. No words needed to understand that the old money line pointed at me, the one they'd been living off and now turned into a joke. They called me in the past. They thought they had escaped the shadow of the man who protected them. I quietly took screenshots, saved them in a folder called Evidence, Hubris. Webb called on Monday morning. "Guess what?" he said. An anonymous tip pushed Seth Davis's file to a special review unit at the tax office. I asked briefly, did they send a letter? Not yet, but soon. Once it arrives, the process will follow standard procedure. 3 days later, Melissa called, voice trembling. "Dad, Seth got a letter from the IRS. It mentions cash transactions in February. Do you think someone reported him?" "Coincidence," I replied lightly. They flagged a pattern. "Calm down. Have your lawyer look," she cried. "We have to put down $5,000 just for the lawyer to take the case." I listened without speaking. Silence can be the distant hammer. Webb came to my office the next day with coffee and a stack of papers. "This is the process," he explained. "They must verify the source of funds. If not, the minimum penalty is $15,000, plus interest and fees." He looked up at me. "When do you want to send the demand to collect the tax lien?" "I'll wait until they start to bleed," I replied. 2 weeks went by, and everything unfolded as I'd sketched in my notebook. Melissa phoned in the middle of the night. "Dad, he's losing it. The lawyer says fines have risen to more than $18,000. Seth blames everyone. He thinks you're behind it." "Me?" I smiled in the dark. "He's worrying too much." After the call, I took out my notebook and drew a new column of figures. Mortgage $2,800, IRS payment $1,500, property tax $400, car insurance $650, living expenses $1,000, total $5,850 per month. Post-tax income is only $4,000, a negative gap of $1,850. No set of numbers allows them to survive more than 3 months. I drew a red line under that negative number and wrote small in the corner. Inevitable. 3 days later, Webb handed me a copy of the official IRS notice. Bold headline, underreported income, $70,000. He explained dryly, $15,000 penalty, principal debt, $18,000, total $33,000. They'll garnish wages if unpaid. I looked up evenly. Perfect. Send the demand letter. 3 days after that, Desert Peak Holdings sent a demand to 8,847 Riverstone Drive. Certified mail, signature required. I kept the postal receipt in a blue folder, labeled Phase 2 Pressure. That evening the phone rang. Melissa, voice breaking. "Dad, we just received a letter from some company, Desert Peak. It says we owe $10,000 in old taxes. Do you know them?" "I've only heard the name," I replied, still staring at the night sky. "Is there a problem?" "We don't have any money left. The IRS just took everything." Her voice fell through the receiver. I did not answer. My silence at that moment was a sentence signed without a gavel. The next morning, Webb came by. "If you want to drive them into a real corner, this is the time. 2 parallel debts, the IRS and the tax lien. No bank will refinance now. If they don't pay, in 30 days we can file foreclosure." I only said, "Mark the day on the calendar. That day they'll understand the meaning of foundation." That night, I walked to the porch and lit an old cigar. The desert wind carried dust and the smell of rain. In the distance, Scottsdale glittered like moths flying toward dead lights. I opened my notebook and wrote the final line for the day. They built a house with stolen money, and now the law has come to live there. Then I closed the book, turned out the light, and let the Arizona night swallow the last sound, the crinkle of the IRS letter landing in the trash. That morning, the Tucson sun rose like a disk of fire, cutting through my office window. I was stirring coffee when the phone rang. Webb. "Mr. Butler," he said, his voice steady as if reading a bulletin. "They've signed the letter. Desert Peak Holdings is now their legal creditor. As of today, the 30-day countdown begins. I nodded, watching the column of light on the wall like a clock's silent mark. Thank you, Marcus. Let time do its work. That afternoon, I stopped by my old bank, the branch where I'd advised hundreds of clients over 35 years. The teller asked, "You're retired now, right?" I smiled. "Not yet. I've got one last case." I rented a new safe deposit box and placed inside it a folder containing an IRS notice copy, a lien certificate, a certified mail receipt, and a handwritten page labeled Phase 3, Endgame. When I closed the box and heard the soft click, it sounded like the final note of a long piece of music. That evening, Melissa called, her voice hoarse, almost a whisper. "Dad, I'm sorry for yelling before." "Seth, he's not okay. He sold the car, but it's still not enough. The IRS wants $15,000 more, and Desert Peak wants over $10,000 in taxes. I'm scared." I stayed silent for a few seconds, then said, "You know, I've worked in finance all my life. Numbers don't lie. Add them up, 33,000 to the IRS, 10,000 in taxes, about 2,800 mortgage a month, not counting living costs. Do any of those numbers turn positive?" She broke down. "No, I know they can't," I said softly. "Then it's only a matter of time. Let the truth work." 2 days later, Webb stopped by my office and set an envelope on my desk. "Want to see the original?" I opened it. The demand letter bore the Desert Peak Holdings logo, first line bold. This letter serves as a formal demand for payment in full of the outstanding property tax lien for $10,487. Failure to pay within 30 days will result in foreclosure proceedings pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 42, 1822-01. I read carefully, then smiled. "Perfect. Send it." Webb nodded. "Already did. They signed this morning." That afternoon, I drove to the grocery store. In the parking lot, I saw the silver Audi that once sat in their driveway, now with a handwritten "For Sale" sign. Dust covered the hood. I stopped and took a photo. A car once worth $68,000 is now worth. No one would pay $40,000. Depreciation, I thought, not just cars. Lies depreciate too. That night, the phone rang. Jason's number. I picked up. His voice was rough, tinged with alcohol. "You think you've won, old man?" "I don't think anything, Jason. I'm just collecting a debt." "That damn company is yours, isn't it?" "I invest in many places." "Why? Is there a problem?" "You're destroying your daughter's life." "No, Jason, you did that. I'm just cleaning up the balance sheet." He breathed hard. "I'll pay. I need time." "I already gave you time. You used it to steal." "I'll sue you." "With what money?" I said quietly, then hung up. I sat in the dark, the glow from the screen reflected in my glass of water. I opened my notebook and wrote, July 2nd, Jason called. Threatened lawsuit. Emotional tone. Panic mixed with denial. Payment unlikely. Deadline, July 25th, 5 p.m. A week passed. Webb updated me. No payment. I heard they tried to refinance but were denied. Credit score dropped below 620. I said only, "They're running out of oxygen. People confess when they're suffocating." 3 days later, the phone rang again. This time, Melissa didn't cry. She sounded drained. "Dad, he confessed. He said he took the money from your safe. I didn't know, I swear." I looked out the window, my voice low. "He said that?" "Yes. He admitted he took it." I nodded slowly, eyes still on the streetlights. "And now you believe it? When everything's already burned down?" She was silent, her breathing caught on the phone. In that pause, I knew she understood. It wasn't anger in my voice. It was the weight of truth, arriving too late. She spoke again, softly. "I want to apologize. But please, don't take the house. It's all I have." I answered gently, almost a whisper. "Melissa, every house has a foundation. Yours is built on lies. It can't stand, even if I wanted it to." That night I didn't sleep. I made coffee and watched the moonlight spill across the dry pond behind my house. I thought of Evelyn, her voice. Never let anger lead. Let justice walk itself. I whispered into the night, I am Evie. Justice, not revenge. The next morning, Webb texted, lien remains unpaid. Recommend. Initiating foreclosure proceedings. We'll draft notice, I replied. Proceed. I closed my notebook, my hand resting on its worn leather cover. No more calculations. Every number had done its part. Now it was the law's turn. I looked out at the Tucson morning, sunlight pouring gold over the spines of dry cactus, and thought, justice doesn't need noise, only precision. I folded the notebook and blew out the candle. Somewhere out there, Webb's letter had left the post office, resting in a courier's hand, on its way to their house. The next 30 days would be the ticking of a clock, and I knew that when it struck 0, only the truth would remain. On July 23rd, the Tucson morning was thick as smoke, the sun not yet up but the air already heavy. I received a text from Webb. No response. 2 days to the deadline. I stared at that line for a long time. 2 days, no longer time, but the final heartbeat of a debtor, confident he was immortal. At noon, the phone rang. Melissa, voice trembling but trying to stay calm. Dad, we're trying to scrape money together. He says he just needs 2 more weeks. Can you wait? I was silent for a moment. 2 weeks can't save a rotten foundation, sweetheart. It collapses from the first bricks, not the last day. She choked. I know, but if you take the house, we'll have nothing. I answered slowly, you've already lost it. You just haven't realized it yet. That afternoon, I received an email from Webb with an attached notice of intent to foreclose. I printed it and set it on the desk, but did not sign. Part of me wanted to see what they would do when the last corner fell. That night, Jason called. Not drunk, not yelling, his voice unusually low. Dad, I know I was wrong. I stayed silent. I only ask for 60 more days. I'll sell the house and pay everything back. Just give me time. Time is what you spend the moment you open the safe, I said. I didn't mean to. I thought I'd pay it back before you knew, he pleaded. And you thought you'd beat the market, beat the law, beat justice. You miscalculated, Jason. Don't do this. I'm asking you, not talking like enemies. You chose to be the enemy of yourself, not of me. Silence on the other end, then he said quietly, If you take the house, I'll treat you as if you're dead, I replied. Then you should start mourning early. I hung up. The next morning, Webb called. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said, placing my signature on the paper. Ink spread faintly on the line. Authorized by Desert Peak Holdings, LLC. 2 days later, the post office confirmed they had received the foreclosure notice. I was sitting in the cafe by Reed Park, where Evelyn and I used to go. What are you writing? The server asked. I smiled. A report for fate. That evening when I arrived home, someone stood at the gate. Jason. Wrinkled shirt, hollow face, eyes, bloodshot from lack of sleep. Dad, he rasped. I have nothing left. The IRS took everything. The bank closed our accounts. I beg you, stop. I opened the gate and stepped onto the porch. You want my mercy, but you never asked for forgiveness. You want me to forget, but you never remembered what was right. I know I'm wrong, he yelled. You won, didn't you? Are you satisfied? I looked at him, my voice even. Justice does not take pleasure, Jason. It only balances the books. You call this fair, when I've lost everything? No. This is a consequence, not fairness. Fairness would have come earlier when you still had a chance to choose right. He was silent a moment, then choked out. Take the house, then. Do it. But I promise you, you will die alone in your justice. I answered, maybe. But at least I won't live off stolen money. He left without looking back. As his car disappeared around the corner, the wheels ground the gravel in a long, dragging scrape like a cut. I went inside, opened my notebook, and wrote, July 25th, 5:03 p.m. Deadline expired. Foreclosure initiated. Emotional resistance collapsed. Then I added a smaller line. They finally know what loss feels like. That night, I sat on the porch watching the Arizona stars blink. I felt neither joy nor rage, only a strange emptiness, the hollow that asks for neither laughter nor tears. Perhaps that is the final stage of every revenge, when your silence is large enough to drown out another's sound. I sat in Marcus Webb's office as Arizona sunlight flooded through the glass window. He slid a paper toward me. Notice of intent to foreclose. The total balance of principal and interest was $22,000, including legal costs and a 16% annual penalty. I read every line carefully, then signed without hesitation. Webb asked, "Are you sure?" "Once it's sent, there's no turning back," I answered. "I've been ready since February. Send it today." 2 days later, Webb called again. He signed the receipt. That sentence echoed in my mind like the sound of a final lock clicking shut. That night I got a call. Jason's voice trembled. $22,000? That's insane. I only owed $8,000. I replied calmly, "Interest accrues monthly, Jason. 7 months. No payment. You know I've got no money. The IRS took everything. I'm just reclaiming what's mine. If you can't pay, the law will do it for me. Please, Ray, I'm sorry. I just need time." "I already gave you 7 months. "Then what do you want? My life?" "No, just the thing you bought with my money." Jason's voice broke. Then he sobbed into the phone. I said only, "You have until July 25th, 5 p.m. Then came Melissa's weaker voice. "I didn't know, I swear. I just want to keep our home." "I know," I said, "but knowing. Late doesn't erase consequences. Justice doesn't wait for tears." I hung up. 3 days later, Webb reported. He applied for loans at 3 banks, all denied. Tried selling the Audi, but owes more than it's worth. Total dead end. I felt no joy, no pity, only the sense of truth returning to equilibrium. 2 weeks before the auction, Webb and I reviewed finances one last time. "If they don't pay, are you ready to buy it back?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I've prepared." I withdrew from investments, certificates of deposit, and my retirement fund, over $300,000, enough to purchase the Riverstone house at auction. Marcus looked at me and slowly asked, "You're really going through with this?" I nodded. "I'm not reclaiming money. I'm giving justice an address to return to." 3 days before the sale, I went to the bank and signed the withdrawal. The teller looked at me suspiciously, but I just smiled. 40 years in financial consulting had taught me, to win, prepare before others even think of retreat. On August 28th, Tucson burned under the sun. I wore a gray suit, buttoned the jacket, and checked the $300,000 cashier's check in my pocket. The Maricopa County Courthouse was cold and bright, smelling of paper and old oak. Webb waited at the security gate. "Ready?" he asked. "More than ever." We walked into the auction room, rows of benches ahead. At the back, Jason and Melissa sat silently, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. The county officer read aloud, "Property number 8847 Riverstone Avenue, Scottsdale. Opening bid $250,000. I raised my paddle. 2 other bidders followed. The price crept up. $270, $280. One dropped out. $290,000, I said, voice steady. The room went silent. Sold to bidder number 12 for $290,000. The gavel fell. Jason shot up, staggered, then collapsed onto the bench, face in his hands. I signed the papers and handed over the check. The clerk confirmed, "Transfer of ownership is immediate. Former occupants have 48 hours to vacate." As I stepped outside, sunlight hit my eyes, and I heard Jason shout behind me, "You took everything from me!" I turned, my voice calm. "No, son. You took it first. Now the law is just restoring the order." Melissa pulled him away. I didn't look back. 2 days later, county officers supervised the eviction. I stood at a distance, watching the truck carry away what they once flaunted: a leather sofa, a TV, an 8-seat dining table, all bought with money I once trusted them with. When the truck doors closed, I whispered, "Justice doesn't require joy, only completion." 3 days after the auction, I returned to my house in southern Tucson. No laughter, no phone calls, no congratulations, just a quiet morning, sunlight filtering through the blinds, and the smell of strong coffee. On the desk lay the new property certificate, still creased from the fold, bearing the words, Owner of Record, Raymond Butler. I read it once more, then closed it and placed it in the drawer. The feeling wasn't joy or victory, just closure. At noon, I went outside, trimmed the cactus line, and wiped the thin layer of dust from the steps. The house was unusually silent. My neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, passed by and said softly, Congratulations, Ray. I read in the paper it's all settled. I smiled faintly. Yes, it's over, but some endings don't make you lighter. She didn't understand, only nodded and walked on, leaving me alone in sunlight the color of sand. That afternoon, I drove to Webb's office to sign the papers for the sale of the Riverstone house. He greeted me with his calm gaze. That house is fully yours now. Planning to keep it? I don't need another house, I replied. I just want to close it the right way. Webb looked at me, pen in hand. I found a buyer, a young family with 2 kids, hoping to move in before school starts. Good, I said. All profit goes to the Evelyn Foundation Scholarship Fund. She used to say, true justice is helping someone avoid another person's mistake. Webb stayed silent for a moment, then murmured, Evelyn would be proud. When I left the office, the desert wind blew across, coating my shoes with red dust. I looked down the long stretch of road, remembering when Evelyn and I once drove through there, when everything was simpler, just 2 people, 1 old car, and a dream of building a small home. Everything was still there, except now I stood alone. That night I turned on the warm lamp in the living room and sat before her photograph. Evelyn's eyes in the picture were still gentle and bright. I said quietly, They've lost everything, Evie, but I'm not sure I have anything left either except this room. I poured a glass of whiskey and sat still, listening to the clock tick. Justice, I realized, doesn't taste sweet. It's a kind of cold silence. The next day, Webb called. The buyers placed their deposit. After fees, you'll net about $115,000. I simply said, Send it all to the foundation. I'm keeping nothing. He paused, then said, I've never seen anyone seek justice so righteously. It's not revenge, I replied. It's just balancing the ledger. That evening I walked by the small lake behind my house. The surface shimmered under the moonlight. I sat on the old wooden bench and wrote in my notebook, August, justice completed. No triumph, no blood, only numbers returning to their rightful places. I closed my eyes, listening to crickets and the wind moving through eucalyptus leaves. Suddenly I understood. Justice doesn't come to make us happy. It comes to restore the silence someone once took away. Before bed, I turned off every light except the small lamp. By her photo, the dim glow fell across Evelyn's frame. I smiled. Rest easy, Evie. Everything's back where it belongs. 2 weeks after the auction, the Tucson sky turned soft and pale, as if autumn had arrived early. I woke early, made coffee, and was about to open my notebook when I heard a knock at the door. No one usually visited on a Tuesday morning. When I opened it, the familiar mailman stood there holding a sealed white envelope. Signature, Mr. Butler, he said. I signed, took it, and the moment I saw the sender's name in the corner, Melissa Davis, my heart skipped a beat. I carried the envelope inside, set it on the table, and waited a few minutes before opening it. Inside was a handwritten letter in blue ink, her writing shaky as if written through tears. Dad, I don't know how to begin. I've written and torn this letter 3 times before sending it. Maybe because I know that after everything that happened, there are no words good enough for an apology. You were right. I knew, not everything, but enough to doubt. When Seth brought the money home and said it was a company bonus, I wanted to believe him because believing made life easier. I was afraid to ask, afraid the truth would destroy the small illusion of happiness I was holding on to. That was cowardice, and now I'm paying for it. Seth is gone. He couldn't stand losing everything. The police said he left Arizona, maybe heading to Texas for a temporary job. As for me, I'm living in a rented apartment, working night shifts at a convenience store. Every night, I wonder why it took losing everything to realize you were right. I'm not writing this letter for forgiveness. I just want you to know. I understand now. I understand what you meant by silent justice. It's not loud, not about winning or losing. It's about balance. And now I just want balance back in my heart. If possible, I'd like to visit Mom's grave. Not to atone, but to say the words I never said. I'll wait for your permission. If you don't want to see me, I'll understand. Melissa. I read it through, then placed it down. The room was still, filled only with the ticking of the clock. What I felt wasn't anger or pity, just a slow, quiet sadness, like dry wind moving through the trees outside. That afternoon, I drove to Evergreen Cemetery. On Evelyn's headstone was the dried lavender bouquet I had left last month. I replaced it with fresh flowers, stood in silence for a while, then took out my phone and texted Melissa, Saturday, 10 a.m. I'll be here. That morning was cool, the sunlight gentle. When I arrived, she was already there, standing at a distance, holding white chrysanthemums. Her face was gaunt, but her eyes no longer hid. She stepped closer and said softly, Dad. I nodded without a word. We both knelt to place the flowers before the headstone. The breeze carried the scent of chrysanthemums, mixed with earth. I don't expect forgiveness, she said, voice trembling. I just hope you believe I'm not the same person anymore. I don't hold hatred, Melissa, I said, but forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing to live on without letting the past chain you. She nodded, tears falling. I understand. We stood there, saying nothing more, letting the wind carry away whatever words remained. As she left the cemetery, she turned back and said softly, Dad, thank you for not destroying me along with him. I replied, I don't need enemies, Melissa. Only truth. That evening back home, I unfolded her letter again, folded it neatly, and placed it in my notebook beside Evelyn's photo. On a new page, I wrote, Forgiveness doesn't erase. It begins when pain stops demanding payment. Then I turned off the lights and stepped out to the porch. The Arizona sky glowed orange, and in that sunset I felt something simple. Justice may come through law, but peace only comes through the heart. September passed in an unusual calm. The Arizona desert cooled. Thin mist drifted among the cacti at dawn, and I realized I had stopped counting days. Life had settled back into its slow rhythm, like an old clock finally rewound to keep time again after years of running off beat. Every morning I made coffee, opened the porch doors, and let the wind carry the scent of dry earth and resin. On my desk still sat the old notebook beside Evelyn's framed photo. I no longer kept timelines or calculations, only brief notes about small things. Grass grows again after rain, sparrows return to the eaves. Everything eventually finds its way back. One Saturday afternoon, Webb stopped by with a folder stamped and sealed. The Riverstone sale was officially closed. The buyer wired the funds, he said. After fees, I've transferred over $100,000 in profit to the Evelyn Foundation, and I've sent confirmation to their office. I nodded. Good. Let that money build something better than houses. Opportunity. Webb smiled faintly. You know, not many people can walk away from a war without carrying hatred. Hatred is like bad debt, Marcus, I replied. The longer you hold it, the higher the interest. The next day, I received a letter from the foundation. Thanks to your contribution, the Evelyn Butler Young Engineer Scholarship will reopen next year. We honor your faith in the next generation. I read the letter and smiled. Evelyn used to say, no one truly grows old if they're still helping someone begin. That afternoon, I drove out to the edge of town where a red dirt road led to the small lake where we once fished. Sunlight poured gold across the water, reflecting off clouds like silk. I parked, sat on the old wooden bench, and opened the leather notebook one last time. On the final blank page, I wrote slowly, September. I close the book, lift my eyes to the sunset. In that moment, I no longer see Jason's shadow or any anger in my heart, only Evelyn smiling somewhere between the fading lines of light. Perhaps justice isn't about reclaiming what's lost, but finding peace enough to let go. On the drive home, I passed the local technical college. A new sign hung above the gate, Evelyn Butler Engineering Scholarship, now open for applications. I stopped, read it again, and felt time slow. A few students laughed near the entrance, holding project folders. One of them waved, mistaking me for a professor. I nodded and drove on. By the time I reached home, the sunset had settled over the Catalina Range, painting the sky in burnished copper. I poured a glass of whiskey, stepped onto the porch, and sat in the weathered chair. Crickets sang, leaves brushed, and far off, the hum of cars moved along the highway. Everything blended into one wordless song, the song of closure. I opened my small notebook once more and wrote the final line. Evelyn, justice is complete, and silence has finally grown gentle. People often think revenge is about taking back what was lost. But to me, justice isn't about taking back. It's about putting things in their rightful place. Some debts aren't paid with money, but with understanding. And some people only learn the value of honesty when they've lost everything. If you've ever been betrayed, belittled, or kept silent just to preserve peace, remember this. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the first step of justice, the kind that doesn't need applause, only completion. My story ends here. The Riverstone house has a new owner, but Evelyn's name remains, not on a brass plaque, but in every scholarship that lets a young person rise through faith instead of deceit. I closed the notebook, watched the moon rise above the trees, and whispered to myself, justice doesn't require joy, just completion. And tonight, it's complete. If you believe that justice may be slow but never truly disappears, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and comment the city you're listening from. Because somewhere out there, someone like you is learning to stay silent so that justice can speak. I'm Raymond Butler, and this was my story.